women um, with flexible work schedules and so on and so forth. And so I wanted to kind of help corporations retain women, which is something we'll talk about in terms of work-life balance and things like that. So that is my background.
Okay, that's great. Thank you so much. So I've prepared a bunch of questions with some girls on the leadership team, and this will be more of a Q&A style, but the girls that are here definitely pop questions into the chat as they come. And at the end, there'll be time for you guys to ask questions as well. So my first question is, I feel like this might be a common question you get as someone who started your own business, but do you feel like you were always an entrepreneurial thinker, or when you started your first business, was it just coming from a really unique idea that you knew you could grow?
So that's a great question. And I think, let me start with everybody's an entrepreneur. Okay. So even if you're going to be a lawyer or a doctor, you really don't have anything until you get people to come to you, right? You could be the best doctor, but if nobody knows and ultimately you're not a business, you don't have an active business because nobody's buying your trade, whatever it may be. So to start, I think everybody's an entrepreneur. Even if you work at a large corporation and not necessarily your own entrepreneur, you're probably managing some sort of division within a company or a group, and you have to really treat that as an entrepreneurial venture. So it's kind of understanding that piece was super important. The second thing is I really, as an entrepreneur, see opportunities and they're really basic. And I think that's the other thing when people think about starting their own business or entrepreneurship, it's like, oh, I have to have this incredible $1 billion idea. And sometimes it's just the basics that are just like, hey, I just want to fix this. And it's not a big deal, but hey, I can make money and I love what I do and I want to help fix something. That's sort of like, how I, got into it and how I look at sort of entrepreneurship.
You. And so that segues into, how did you come up with your idea for your first company that you started, Suburban Jungle? Because I was trying to do some research and it seemed like a really complicated business plan. So I would love to hear more about that.
Yeah. So back in the day, and I go back to, so I started my career. I went to undergraduate business school, and I went into investment banking. And in investment banking, I was working 90 hours a week and traveling, and it was like a great experience. And then I went to a smaller bank, which helped me work with small companies. And I loved working with small companies, really understood it much more so than working with larger companies, because in small companies, you really kind of see that the CEO wears many hats, that, there's, sort of the basics of business 101 when you kind of, get down to it. After that, I went to Columbia Business School and I was starting a family. And so I went back to say, hey, I can't work 90 hours a week and travel when I want to have a larger family. So I was just very realistic with myself. And I think that we all, and I know that we just addressed this, we all think that we're going to move a million miles an hour, but everything is trade-offs. There are 24 hours in a day. And so when I was in business school, again, I was, at Columbia, and I'm like, there's just such opportunity. And at the same time, I was trying to figure out, how did I want to raise my family? So I'm expecting my first, and I was like, okay, well, should I move uptown? We wanted to have a larger family. So we're like, okay, should we stay in the city? Should we move out? And then I realized that the residential real estate marketplace really was inefficient. It actually continues to be very inefficient, even with like the billions and billions of dollars of, prop tech investing going on right now. And unfortunately, not much has changed in the real estate world. The commissions are very fat, and yet nobody's really getting the help that they need, trying to help, understand where to buy and how to buy. So as first-time buyers, it really, I felt like there was a huge market that was underserved. And so I worked with the head of the real estate department at Columbia to say, hey, how can I fix this? And I came up with an idea and kind of presented it. And, in business school, you have like a lot of opportunities, more so now than back in the day when I started it, to kind of just really help like run with an idea. You have so many resources, and it's up to, anybody to take advantage of them. So that's really how I came up with it. It was personal experience. And I go back to, like, a lot of people say, sort of like the first question is like, oh, did you wake up and say, hey, you want to start a business? Like, no, I wasn't like, I have to be an entrepreneur. I have to, do this. But it's something that when you see an opportunity and understand that no matter what you do, you're still a business owner in some capacity. That's kind of what, was the big idea behind it.
That makes a lot of sense now, because I was looking at the website and I was getting that sense, but it makes sense that comes from a firsthand experience. So I think a lot of times when people say, I started a business, no one really knows what that means. So would you be able to walk us through, like, after you had this business idea, what were the first few steps getting started? What were logistics you had to take care of? And then how did you slowly start to build up the business?
Sure. So, when I was starting the business, you have to understand like the time was so different, right? So, like, you guys, it's so easy today to start a business. And I have to tell you, like, it's next to nothing in terms of cost. It's like everybody has a million ideas. And so the technology today is so different than what it was like when I was starting it. And the access that you guys have to letting people know about your idea with the technology and social media that you have present is literally incredible. I mean, you guys can honestly have a thought, put it up on a website within 15 minutes, send it out to the entire world that and like let your, world know, let their world know, and so on and so forth. It's a pretty incredible time to be launching a business. At the time, I didn't have those opportunities. It was like a big deal to get like a website, and we didn't have social media. And so, the marketing and the plan was so different. So, I think for me, the biggest sort of first comment I have is everybody will tell you, oh, you got to put together a business plan. You're going to spend like a year putting together a business plan. And the world changes every day. Every 24 hours, you have to understand that the world is going to change. So by putting together and spending a lot of time on a plan, it's not a good use of your time. So like you want to frame out your idea, which is what I did. And then I ran to execute it. And when I was starting the business, like it was a different time, but I was very cheap. Like I was like, well, the point of having a business is not to just raise money, which everybody is now running to do. And now VCs are like there's too much VC money going into businesses without enough sort of like, real ammo behind it, if that makes any sense, because there's too much money chasing too few actually good businesses. And there's some great businesses out there. But my point is, for me, when I was starting a business, I'm like, hey, like, let's keep it really basic. Like, how much energy is it going to take me to make $1? Right. So you have friends that are like, hey, I'm going to start a cupcake business. And you're like, you're going to work so hard and you're going to make 13 cents, so number one, I was like, okay, how do I make money? And number two, how do I scale it? And so when I started the business, the first thing I did was, again, I had a community of people, and people are the most important thing with any business, right? You need people to come to be clients or whatever you're doing, to buy, to get your service, whatever you're selling, whatever you're doing. And so for me, I had the community at Columbia. And so I was like, hey, who wants to try this concept out? Let me know what you think. And it was completely free. And so what I did was I developed a free service, but it was very profit margin heavy. So for example, if we sold and we didn't have our own brokers, and I don't need to walk you through the details of the business that I started, because then, but the biggest point is that, I asked my community and said, can you try this? Let me know your feedback. And off of that, I kind of made the first little bit of money. And from there, I basically then created marketing and a site and really spent money. So now a lot of people will come up with an idea, raise money, and then have to then prove out their concept. I did it a little bit differently, and I'm still a big fan of sort of being conservative and really starting the business from scratch. But today, literally, you can throw up a website, you have social media presence, and then I can go into more detail of like how to actually launch it, in terms of having the different silos, but keeping it super simple and not overly complicating things. It's just super easy to do it now online and stuff.
Yeah, I think most people in this Zoom room know, but I actually started my own website company type thing during COVID, and it's really easy. So I think that's really good advice. I think this thought of starting your own business is so intimidating, but it's so accessible now. So I think that's really important advice. And I also, just another comment, last year we heard from the CEO of Birchbox, and she went to the Harvard Business School and had a really similar origin story where she started by offering her free service to fellow Harvard students and getting feedback, and started in a really similar way. So just as more of a comment type of thing. So I know you said you didn't want to get into the complicated stuff, but I think we all are interested in that. With your specific business plan, like what marketing tactics worked and how did you develop marketing strategies and stuff like that?
That's a great question. I think the world of marketing is so different right now, and it's different even than it was 3 months ago and 6 months ago. And like currently, what our marketing plan was is so different. When I first started, we didn't have social media and Google as much, right? So they just became different animals over the last several years. And so now there are firms that really just all they do is they optimize Facebook ads, Instagram ads, TikTok, like all of the social media. And I think that's like a huge opportunity, but it's becoming more difficult. Like the market is very saturated in terms of like people that want to try to figure out the algorithm to get your product or your service, your business in front of the right audience. So again, today, I think that, those are like the key, I think people really believe in real sort of not influencers, but like, word of mouth, and word of mouth is different obviously than it was back in the day. So today, I think people really want to understand who's using the product, who's verifiable, and so I think that's a big part of the campaign, like real people, real faces. So for us, and again, I sold the business, and so I haven't been actively working there as of December 31st. It sold to a private equity fund, and they combined it with a portfolio company they own. But a big push for us was the personal client experience. And so we worked with thousands and thousands of clients every day, and people really were drawn to people. They want to know who's using it, how they relate to those people. And I think that applies to any product, so whatever you're doing, you just want to make it relatable and say, oh, I could totally use it if these people are using it or doing what these people are doing. So I think that was like a big push, and how that translates is going to be very different. Me telling you like, hey, our social strategy was X, Y, and Z. It should be very different than even 30 days from now, because it's changing and the algorithms are changing and so on and so forth. So
Yes, thank you. So when you are doing marketing and like growing your business, I feel like networking is a common term that people are always like, how do you network? What networking was helpful for you? So can you talk a little bit about like the networking that was necessary to start your business, and who you were reaching out to, and what networks were most successful for you?
yeah, so it's interesting. Like, I think that like when you professionally network, I don't love to do that. And I know like I'm very opposite. And I know there are so many networking clubs and, but I just feel like the people that end up networking are very salesy. And what you want to do is get organic, great advice from really smart people. And so for me, at least, like I really went to, again, my network, right? And you start with your sort of like, whatever network you're in, and you could be talking to so many different people. And my theory is that like you learn something from every human being. So, when I was talking to people to like grow my business or figure out the next steps or hire a CFO, like, it's all through talking to people, but not like it's my job, like talking to people organically, like, hey, somebody put somebody in touch because they loved my, idea. And then, so I got the former CFO of the WeWork competitor that, was really great at raising whoever, you know what I'm saying? So like you have these meetings, but they're not forced. And I'm a big fan of like organic conversations and just meeting people. And it could be literally friends of friends or, so I'm not a big fan of like formal networking because there's so many groups that you get invited to, and you just have to be careful because you want to maintain your brand, not just your company brand, but your personal brand. You don't want to spread yourself too thin. So that's my advice is professional networking is really more for sales folks, but when you're really looking for real advice and real connections, it probably comes through some other method.
And did you feel like you have someone in your mind that was a big mentor to you, or multiple people, like whether that was in your schooling or thereafter, people that really stood out to you as like you said, you were using your organic community. So were there specific people that you felt like really helped you along the way?
I mean, not like one person in particular. It wasn't like I had, somebody that I kept going to for advice. I just think like crowdsourcing, and again, like, and it's interesting, like I really believe like the more people you meet in the world, like the smarter you become. And a lot of people are very closed off to meeting people. They'll say, well, I have my group of friends or I have my family, and like I'm good. Like I don't need to meet more people. And I think that every human being, like as much conversations you can have, like I remember we had offices in like WeWork for a while, and the beauty of like WeWork, and I'm not there now, but was you just met so many different people just grabbing a coffee, or I would put out a message to say, hey, I need to add to my tech team, and then I'd have people come to the door and the energy. And so like for me, that was like you just learn from everybody. It wasn't just one person that I kept going to. There wasn't somebody who ran a successful business that I was like, okay, how did you do this? Because I also think that the world is changing and everybody's learning at the same time, if that makes any sense. Like when you think about like there were so many things that didn't exist when I started this business. And so if I had just spoken to people that had existing businesses that were successful, they wouldn't necessarily be able to give me the right advice. Like crypto didn't exist, and NFTs didn't, like none of like there's like a whole world out there. So I don't know, just crowdsource as much as possible.
Thank you. That's good advice. My parents were just watching the WeWork docu or like the show that was just created. So that's
Oh,
fun. Like it's just really
yeah,
relevant in my mind right now.
it was so good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was really well. It was an interesting story. Okay, this is a sort of generic question, but in what ways have you seen COVID change your work life? And I know you had a transition of businesses. Did that have anything to do with it? And how did you watch COVID change like how your businesses operate?
So it's interesting. So we talked a little bit about like the work-life balance. And so when I decided that I, wanted to, I'm smart, I'm driven, but I also couldn't dedicate 90 hours a week realistically to the corporate workplace. This is pre-COVID, obviously. I felt that we could all, especially with the technology that we have in place, all work remotely. And so I was able to really hire, we had hundreds of people that worked for us. And I hired the most incredibly smart, driven people that just dropped out of the workforce. They worked at like, the top law firms, the top investment banks. And I would have never been able to retain that talent had I not been, like kind of family first, like, hey, like, I don't care when you get your work done, but as long as you're productive. So I don't care if you're like, and I would catch up on my emails, at like 2 a.m. and I had ideas and I would, Slack people like, in the middle of the night, not that I would expect any response, but I think when, the biggest opportunity for me was this remote work flexibility, and that empowered people love autonomy and being empowered. People hate being micromanaged and they hate being told what to do, which is basically when you're telling people to go to office 9 to 5, and then like I would send an email or call somebody at like 5:30 and no answer, because like their time's up. So I think that was a huge thing that we were ahead of the curve on. And now everybody's kind of like, oh, COVID has kind of pushed remote work to the forefront and people are doing great. And again, there are pros and cons. And I get there's like a hybrid work thing, but specifically for women in the workplace who want to continue to work and have that work-life balance. And again, at certain times your career is going to need more of your attention, certain times like your family will. And like that's okay. But now we have this huge opportunity for women in business that didn't exist almost before pre-pandemic. So I know that there's been a lot of negative press because women and specifically new mothers have had to juggle, remote school, remote work, and a lot of things. And I'm not belittling that, but I think long term, it's a huge opportunity. So COVID has brought that. I sold my business during COVID fully like remote. I had meetings with investors. I had due diligence. It was a pretty incredible process to run selling a business. And it was all done during COVID, completely remote, whereas normally I would have had to fly to, 6 different states and, have multiple meetings. And it was pretty remarkable. So, and in terms of COVID, I think like, look, there's to be determined in terms, like what the long-term effects are on the workplace. But I think I'm kind of a glass half full, like, yeah, it's been a pretty terrible time for everybody, but glass half full, more family time, more, remote work opportunities, look at the positives, I think.
Mhm. And aside from COVID, when you were building your first business and now this business, what were some setbacks you had and like bumps in the road, and how did you bounce back from those?
That's a great question. Again, like there weren't any major setbacks. I think the biggest, question I really struggled with when I had to grow the business was, how to hire. I was very nervous about hiring people because when you hire people, you're very accountable. You have to make sure they're happy, that they're paid well, that they're motivated, and every day. And as you get more employees, it's like all of a sudden you have like hundreds of people depending on you for their happiness. So I was like very, very nervous about hiring, growing, and then really raising money. That was like a huge question for me. We got approached a ton from multiple VCs, and I struggled, and we had great valuations. And I just said, do I want to give a piece of my company? Like my company was so profitable. It's like, okay, you're going to give me $20 million, but I don't need the money to do anything differently than what I would do. So I went back and forth, and ultimately I said no to VC because I wanted to retain full ownership and have control. And that was the biggest thing. I didn't want anybody to tell me what to do. Having said that, in hindsight, I had some really great brand name VCs that wanted to invest. We could have probably, taken it to another level, but I wouldn't know. So that's like the big struggle that, I really faced. And then, just hiring and keeping people happy. It's like a tough job. I think people ultimately are, a company's greatest assets. And what's funny is that like, I know you guys are all thinking about like, okay, well, my career path is going to be like, finance or whatever. Now, I think that the biggest, most important job in any company is human resources. And I don't think anybody's like dying to go into human resources, but I mean, I don't know if you are, and I'm not belittling it, but I think it doesn't get the street cred it deserves. It's a very, very hard job. And marketing is number two, because without a company, without marketing, without reaching your key demographic, you can't get, traction.
So as you're talking about the hiring process and that being something that was hard for you, what did your hiring process look like and what did you look for just as girls that are going to be entering the workforce soon and applying?
That's a great question. And for different positions, we look for different things. But I think the biggest thing was like, can I relate to this person? Like, do I want to work with this person? Do I want to call them and just hear how they're doing? And like, if you just kind of, you just want to have a presence and have great EQ, which sounds silly because you obviously, there are thresholds of like, we wanted super smart people and had like the basics of, but after that, it's like, do you want to spend time with these people? Do you want to have lunch, with these people? And that was hard to find. There are a lot of people that may look great on paper, but if you can't have a conversation with them and they rub you the wrong way because they're a little rough around the edges, because we're a client focused business, and depending upon the position, and then even tech, it's like, did they do the research? Like basic stuff when you interview, like this is the biggest like thing I would say is do research before you talk to anybody. Like have great questions, be smart, like don't come in and, not know what the business does. I can't tell you how many interviews that I've done where people had no idea what we did. And I'm like, why are you here? And it's frustrating because you're wasting my time. And it's like, if you sit there, whoever you're talking to is probably like, look, they're probably calculating their worth every minute that they're talking to you. They're like, okay, I could be doing X amount of things. And instead I'm talking to somebody who didn't even take 5 minutes to like Google what we do. So anyway, that's my biggest word of advice when you interview.
And once you do hire your employees, how do you feel like you motivate them to be passionate about what they're doing and the company's message?
That's a great point. You know what? I really felt like that was never my job. And I was like, look, like you have to be passionate about what you do. I can't make you happy. I can't tell you your job is awesome. I think that like you have to find something that makes you happy and makes you feel like you're like just making a difference, whatever it may be, whatever you do, it doesn't even matter. It's just like, if you're happy and motivated, and if the job isn't that, and if there's another position or whatever, that's different. But I can't, like, I wasn't in the position of like, hey guys, we're all going to play ping pong now and we're all going to go, I think it's great to like have a couple of nights out for dinner, now and again. But I really felt like the happiness and the motivation really, had to be with the employee. And that's the thing that like was hard when you're interviewing. It's like, well, what motivates you? And a big thing, which is surprising, it was never money. It was like, they wanted to do this job because they thought it was an awesome company. They thought it was an awesome concept and they wanted to be a part of it. And so those are the people you want. You don't want the people that are just like there to collect a paycheck. And of course, like financials are important. I'm not belittling that, but you can work hours as a barista, and like make money. You could be an Uber driver. There are like a gazillion things you could be doing to make money. Like, why do you want to make money here? And that's like, that's something that you have to be self-motivated. So I go back to like, for you guys, I mean, obviously nobody's making you be on, in this, like on the Zoom and do all these things that you're doing. That's coming from you, right? It's not your family being like, you have to do this, right? It's the same concept when, you're working. So.
Yeah. And so when did you decide you wanted to sell your business and like, how was that transition? I feel like for us, maybe to make it more relatable, like when you switched your career, even though you were like selling your own business and starting a completely new business, that's amazing. But when people are switching careers in their lifetime, like how is that transition and what advice do you have?
I think it's like, I don't know when the right time to sell is. I think very few people do. It's kind of like you kind of do what you think is right. I think I was ready to, I think I saw the business grow so well. And I said to myself, look, we grew from a tiny little idea, right? With no fun, like nothing, like came up with like an idea, made it super profitable. We had like 70% profit margins. We grew across the country. We had hundreds of employees, and we were approached by people that were interested in, purchasing us. And so I went to my CFO and I said, what do you think of this. And he was like, look, if these people are approaching you, let's approach a few more people just to have a conversation, just see what we come up with in terms of the best offer. And the offers we got were all varied. There are different sort of pieces to the puzzle. There's, the percentage that they're buying, the valuation, the structure. A lot of people, wanted me to stay on for a couple of years. A lot of people, so it was just a mix. And so we kind of evaluated the best situation. And for me, it was really important for the company to end up in great hands so that they can continue to grow. So all those factors is something that, when the deal ultimately finalized, I was really happy with it. And I think that's like a really incredible moment for any entrepreneur when, first of all, somebody else validates what you've done, and I think that was like the biggest, thing for me. Cause like, you're just working, you're just kind of doing your thing. And then, an outside person comes and says, hey, what you built is awesome. That's like such a pat on the back, because again, for me, it wasn't the money. It was more like, I'm making a difference. I've done this. And I felt really proud of the company we built. And by the way, our employees, we had the most incredible retention. Like nobody ever left. Like the company I started years and years and years ago, like was able to keep the people, and they're all still working there. So that's like a pretty, incredible testament to, what we built in the dynamic of the concept. So so that was, but in terms of the sales process, ours was super smooth. I know a lot of people run different processes, but we never hired an investment bank, or it was really, again, like I mentioned, really organic, having conversations, talking to people. That's like the key to, I think, anything.
Yeah. Jane, do you want to ask a question?
Yeah, so I just find it really interesting how you mentioned balance and like your work life versus your home life. And I was wondering, how can you manage kind of this overwhelming feeling that you need to do it now and you need to like, I don't know, just get moving and just do it, because it's such an overwhelming industry, I feel like business is. And I personally struggle with kind of keeping everything balanced and juggling everything.
That's a great question. I think, everything needs different levels of attention at different times. So it's like, for me, I have like very good executive function and like, I'm very organized. So like my husband makes fun of me all the time. He's like, well, nobody needs you to be so organized. And I was like, well, it enables me to like, we have 4 kids. We're like all over the place. And yet like, I don't think anybody that like I work with knows anything about like, if I'm, they don't know if I'm picking up a kid or I'm on a Zoom or I'm on a conference, but they don't know where I'm at. They don't know what's happening, but everything gets done. So I think it's about priorities, right? It's about scheduling, and it's about just staying like, again, everything needs different levels of attention at different times. And there'll be times where your work, life will need 100% of your attention, and some things will fall, by the wayside family wise. And other times you're just like, your family needs you more, and stuff at work will just get done, but it all gets done. And like I mentioned, I think we live in a world right now where we can be connected at any point. Like I can literally come and have a meeting with my LA team without going to LA. Like that's a pretty incredible thing. And I think that anybody who doesn't take advantage of the opportunities that we have as women now, it's like, shame on us, right? Like corporations need us and want us. It's 10 seconds to start any business, any idea. And so I don't know, I feel like sky's the limit for you guys. Like you're very lucky to be in this time. I mean, not that it's not stressful, and I understand, but it's, glass half full.
On your last point there, do you think you've faced struggles being a woman in business, or do you think it hasn't really affected your career and starting your own business?
I personally have never had an issue. I think that if you're smart and well-spoken and like, do your homework, I think everybody takes you seriously. And I know that the issues do exist, and I'm not saying they don't. I just have never had that issue with anybody or anything. So I can't speak, but it's been, if anything, I think right now, what we're seeing with like startups is that like people need to invest in women. They're like excited to hear women only, I'm getting recruited for a ton of women, only boards, so like all these opportunities are for us to seize and hopefully make the most of anything we can.
Yeah, and I know you touched on some initiatives you have to like sustain female employees with, I think, your new business you were talking about. How do you specifically do that? And like, what are concrete actions you can take to ensure that?
Sure. I think the biggest thing, like I mentioned before, was like really empowering people. And like I mentioned, I think there'll be times where, people's families need them more. And then there'll be other times where they can dedicate more of themselves to work. And I think that when larger corporations understand that, I think that they're, this with the whole return to work situation and hybrid work, it looks different for people in different stages of their life, right? So if you're a new mother and you're just home with like a newborn, what amount of remote work would be appropriate for you, because it's harder to get a newborn, for example, there's just different demands than if you have high school kids or you have kids in elementary, whatever, the children that I think the children aspect and managing that, along with responsibilities and accountability at work, is super important. So it just varies, and I think that companies are trying to right now make a one sort of size fits all solution for women, right? Oh, you're a woman, you can work 3 days a week, but that's not maybe what works best, right? Some people may say, hey, can I come into the office 7 a.m. and leave by 1:30? If I can maybe come in every other week, and like, depending upon health, daycare, there's so many aspects, right? So like even like childcare is a huge issue for a lot of people. It's extremely expensive. You're taking a risk on leaving any kids with anybody you don't know. Sometimes, especially in like the larger cities where these companies are at, family is not close by to help. So there are like a lot of things that we're working through. And what we're doing is basically meeting with the people that are trying to retain and hearing what's important to them and coming up with solutions. But I think the companies, this is the big thing. The companies want to retain people, especially after people have worked somewhere for a long time and they know the sort of ins and outs, and like they feel comfortable. Like, it's very expensive for companies to replace employees. So they want to do their best. And statistically also, it's better for them, in terms of hiring and, so for a slew of different reasons, we're working with them to kind of come up with, hear what people want, and then come up with solutions.
Abby, you can go ahead and ask your question.
So I just wanted to ask, like, considering what you were just saying about how it is with women, and like working in a business and having children and family and things like that, I wanted to know what your business does to make sure women like are treated fairly in the workplace, like don't deal with any problems. Because I know something we see a lot is women don't get hired as much because people assume, oh, they're gonna have a child, they're gonna go on maternity leave, things like that. So what does your business do to like make sure all women are treated fairly? And what do you think a lot of companies or corporations should be doing to make sure that all women, get the right benefits, get the right treatment at their jobs, things like that?
That's a great question. Let me start with what we do. We basically say, look, you're in charge, you make your own schedule. And if there are times where it's not great for you to work because X, Y, and Z, it could be any slew of things, it's not our business what your issues are. We believe in you and we know that you're going to get on track whenever you can. So that's like the number one thing is we hire smart, motivated women, and they make their own hours, and so the people that work more are just going to be the way we have everything sort of structured. If you have more opportunity to work more, you're going to get more clients, you're going to make more money, X, Y, and Z, right? So a lot of people also opt for like a laid back schedule, right? So we have no problem. Some people are working quarter time because at that time in their lives, that's what they need. And then they ramp up. And then we have people working like full time, like double time, because they want to be busy and they love it and they love the energy. And so I think having that flexibility to kind of go up and down in terms of what works for your lifestyle has been probably the key to retention, because people never feel like, oh, if anybody's overwhelmed, they just ramp it down. We hire more people to take over, and having sort of that flexibility. And then in terms of the other thing, I think we've always had offices, but we've always been like a remote sort of situation, because I'm like, why am I going to have you commute so you can like type, right? Like, unless we have like a meeting, I don't need to see you physically working, right? And I think people really appreciate that, and it gives them hours of extra time, because we have people living in like Brooklyn or downtown commuting to Midtown or wherever, or people even like way out of the city, they're commuting hours. And I'm like, I don't need you to put on a pair of stockings and look pretty for me. Like, I think if we have meetings and so I think that was always a great thing. In terms of bigger picture, what companies could be doing is empowering women to do just that. I think, similarly to like, I just think empowering, giving people autonomy, not micromanaging, and letting people do what they can, and having real clear goals. It's like, hey, we need to get this done. Let me do it on my time. Don't make me come in here and do it within your time frame, right? So I think that's like a big step in the right direction, I think.
Thank you. And Maria, go ahead.
Yeah, so earlier you mentioned how like marketing is also important to the company. So I was wondering if you have any like what tactics do you think worked best for your company, and like what would you recommend?
Sure. I mean, again, like when I first started the company, it was very different. So, technology is totally different even 6 months ago. So I think like the place where TikTok is today was not where it was 6 months ago from a marketing perspective, and even like a year ago. So for us, what really worked is we had a whole tech team that spent their time optimizing online marketing, right? So they would look at Google Ads, Google AdWords, they would look at Facebook ads, Messenger ads. They would, so all basically anywhere online is kind of where we're at. And we would run algorithms to kind of just, discover sort of what the return on investment is. So for each dollar we spent on X, Y, and Z opportunity, what we were getting back. And then we had a designer that really had to understand the different markets we were in, because when you think about how people live and what people look like in different parts of the country, they want to relate to you. So like, as an example, I was in Chicago yesterday, and I was like, it's a big city, a cosmopolitan city, day and night, the way that people dress and talk and eat from New York. Okay. So just as an example, and it's like, your marketing, like a non-experienced marketing team would just kind of create an ad and say, go all out. And so for us, it was very specific to what people, how people live and what people relate to. And you have to have a really good sort of graphic design and understanding of each market, if that makes any sense. And then you can use that to then use the technology that we have with our tech team to optimize every opportunity. And the big thing also is like tracking. And you can't just spend money to say, hey, we're going to spend X on Facebook or Instagram or TikTok or whatever you're spending money on. You have to really see what the return on investment is. So we run like very detailed reporting to show us like what's working, what's not. And so for each customer conversion, right? So whatever your business is, whether it's a service business, whether you're selling an egg, whatever you're selling, for us, we looked at every customer that came in and the cost of that customer acquisition. So we're like, is this customer, if it costs us $200 to actually get that customer, and it takes 3 to 6 months to transition into a revenue opportunity, but that revenue opportunity is $80,000, and that's a great use of time, right? So then we're going to keep adding to that until we top out, and then we've saturated that market, and then we'll go to the next thing.
Thank you. That was interesting, because I actually did a summer internship where I was like helping come up with creatives for advertisements, and I feel like that data side of it is not really known to our generation yet, because we know like, oh, everything's on Instagram, everything's on TikTok, but when these companies are putting that out there, like that you're like looking so deep into like which, even like on Instagram, like which posts are doing better than others and all the data behind it, which I think is really interesting. So I think this is going to be our last question. The other breakout room is also segueing to a close. I think this is a good last question in general, but what advice do you have for young women who want to start their own business? And what advice would you give to your younger self or to us as like a final remark?
I think bigger picture for both, it's like JFDI, just effing do it, because I can't tell you how many people have such great ideas. Like one of my best friends was like, oh, wouldn't it be great to do like, gloves that you can like type with on your phone, and then like, 2 months later, so it's like, whatever your silly idea, there's no idea that's too big, too small. I think it's just a matter of just execute it, start little, start big, whatever it is. I think that's just the biggest thing. It's like, you just have regret when you say, oh, I had this idea, never, the worst thing that happens is you fail. And what does that look like to you? It's like, well, you can't really fail when you start a business, because it's an experience. It's a learning experience. So for me, I think, it's an incredible time to be an entrepreneur, a woman entrepreneur. It's so easy to execute. And so I think, take advantage of the opportunity that you have.
Thank you. Okay, does anyone have any last comments or questions before we head back into the main room?
Thank you for speaking with us. I thought this was really helpful. I really like your whole kind of energy, and I like that, it feels, it just doesn't feel as pressing,
Thanks. It was really great to see you guys and talk to you guys. And I wish you the best of luck. I think you guys are gonna just kill it out there. And I think wish you the best of luck.
Thank you so much. It was so great to hear from you and have this conversation. And I'll be in touch. I also saw Ryan this weekend, which was really funny. I don't know if he told you, but
Yeah, he was like, "Aren't you late for Carly's?" I'm like, I'm going. But
Okay.
anyway, thanks again.
Thank you so much. If you want to come back to the main room, but you're welcome to go. But thank you so much. I think we all really appreciated this and learned.
Gonna sign off. All right, bye guys. Great
Bye.
to see you guys.